Good morning, Andy. How are you?
I'm good, Ryan. How are you doing?
Doing good. I'm super pumped for this conversation because you're in New York and I'm in Minnesota. We have never met, and within 2 minutes, we realized that we have like two seriously small world connections. So I feel like I've known you already because I'll give a shout out to Aaron Street from Lawyerist, and the person that acquired you is from Minnesota, is what it
That's
sounds
right.
like.
Yeah.
So, and you were in the legal space. So let's give the listeners, why don't you just give them the high level flyby, Andy, of like, okay, legal, marketing, what was the whole combination? And then we'll go back and unpack the story.
Yeah, I guess big picture. So I was in law school. I was applying to work at different firms, and then I noticed that every firm I was applying to had a really terrible website. And I was like, I could do something about this. So I, with a friend of mine who was a roommate from college, who was a freelancer, we started a company called JurisPage, which is a small marketing agency focusing on law firms. And it started out as a side business. I practiced law very briefly, and I did a good enough job with our marketing that it took off. And in a very short period of time, in like 3 years, we were eventually acquired by a larger company in the legal tech space. And yeah, from there onto other startups. And that's the 30-second
I
summary
love
of
it.
it all.
Oh, that's great. And what's super fascinating to me, I want to like one thing that I love is like understanding when you started the business, Andy, what was your intent with it? Like, was it like what did you think it could be? Now, when you look back, like what was your goals, or what was the original intent?
Um, the original intent was probably just very simple. Like I wanted to make some money with it, and I wanted to, also I was like realizing I don't want to practice law if I can build a business that's going to be earn more revenue and pay the bills better than being a lawyer would. I'll call that a win. And probably just like modest goals at the beginning. I was hoping that I could scale it and that it would take off. I had no idea that it would become an attractive acquisition target in a few years. That kind of was a pleasant surprise, but we did a lot of things to make that happen. Some of it intentional, some of it luck, but yeah, it all worked out with how it ended up. So,
So
um,
when I think about the business model that of you had an agency, and we can kind of I'd love to explore your guys' business model and how you guys priced things and like what was actually made it sellable, because you know how many attorneys I've talked to, Andy, and I'm sure you as well, because you were what anywhere in the space of they even get to this point where they're billing $500 an hour and they can't get out of that hamster wheel. It's like, yeah, you might be able to pull in 1 million, 2 million in revenue if you got like leverage with associates, but you're still in this billable machine that you can't sell. And these practices, it's all earnouts over 4 years. So how did that
well,
impact, or did it impact your decision on like when you were going to becoming an entrepreneur?
I'm like glad that you bring this up. Like very organically, that was something I was terrified about in law school. Something I didn't really fully appreciate before I applied, but very much your value for practicing law is your billable hour. No matter how productive or efficient you can be, if I can bring in ways to automate things and streamline things, if I'm working for a larger firm, they care mostly about how much time I'm spending billing, because that is how I bring in money and that's how I get paid. That's my value is associated with my time. And so if I become super efficient, that works against me. If I type faster than my colleagues, if I know Excel macros and things like that, that works like it felt like it was working against me. And so that was particularly unexciting for me in terms of the practice, and if I were to try to go to like a bigger law firm or something like that, right? Because like, yeah, like I said, like your revenue is tied to hour and a billable rate, not at all tied to productivity.
Well, and it's so interesting because this concept is not it's the productivity of the day, like you just said,
Yeah.
of like billing, and so you're in this machine of billing, and then if you don't, obviously that's non-utilized hours. But then, like you said, you could streamline your day-to-day activities, but no matter what, like I think about the challenge, and And Aaron Street and I were talking about this at some point. Is like these law firms and CPA firms are very similar. It's slightly different because they got other services, but like they're not really sellable unless they can do other things. It's like a
Mhm.
3-year earn out while the partners are sitting on the beach making a bunch of money, and the next generation's slogging through to in order to in order to
Right,
actually
because
pay their retirement.
right, because all the value of the business is tied to how much money you can keep generating and how
Right.
much more time you can keep spending on it. But like the dream for like most small businesses is to scale it to a point where you can remove yourself from the day to day and you can have the business run without you and make money without you, and that is an asset. But if if the business can't function without you spending time and your labor and efforts on it, then it's not a business, it's a job.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
if you're trying to get it acquired, you're selling a job.
so how did that concept and your very real exposure to it impact certain decisions when you started your firm? Like, because like again, a lot of digital agencies are very similar business models as a law firm, right? It's billable hours, and or it's maybe making a spread on some freelancers. So like maybe walk us through the business model and how your exposure from the legal world impacted your decisions.
So the main things that we were shooting for from the beginning, not just from my experience in the legal space, but also my co-founder's previous experience freelancing, was that he didn't want to go chasing from project to project, which was a lot of his experience as a freelancer too. So we had that common background. So we wanted to make sure from the beginning that all of our projects would be productized services. So fixed scope with fixed deliverables, none of this scope creep where, oh, just let me add one more thing, just let me add one more thing, let's keep this project going on forever. No, fixed scope and recurring revenue for everything. So none of our web design projects, none of our marketing projects would be a one-off project basis. We were never going to take on clients where we would just build them a website, hand it off, and then they would move it to their own GoDaddy or Bluehost hosting or whatever, and then take it from there. Our offer and our pitch was on ongoing service. So we'd design your website, we'd host it, we'd provide ongoing marketing support, help you with your blog, help you get with your paid search and things
Hmm.
like that. And that was our approach. And like early on, we had plenty of people, and yeah, towards even the end, like we had plenty of people who would come to us and say, "Let me write you a check. Just build my website, and I'll take it from here." And we turned them down. We said, "That's not our model. I can refer you to plenty of other people if that's what you're looking for, but that's just not our model." And so, us being very disciplined about this recurring revenue model made it so that we could really scale that recurring revenue and have that MRR that
Hmm.
like SaaS businesses have, and make the business an asset and something valuable, so that if I were to go on vacation for 2 weeks, we could still have cash coming in and revenue coming in, and we can pay the bills and it not be so reliant that I make a new sale this week or this month and
Hmm.
have more and more business coming in.
So, Andy, that is, like, I love and totally agree with everything you said. The question that I have is, it's so hard to say no to the dollars that are sitting in front of you for those big jobs. Hey, here's a check, Andy. And by
It
the way, you're a
hurts.
star. And there you go.
It's
Think it hurts, right? How did you? So, what kept you grounded and convicted that what you were doing was the right thing?
Insanity. Like, so there were two aspects of business that we would turn away regularly. We would turn away one-off projects, and we would turn away customers that weren't in our niche, and our niche being law firms. And so like we sometimes had law firms that were like, "Hey, we have this sister business that's a CPA firm, or can I refer you to a friend of mine who's an accountant?" And we turned them away. We said, "Sorry, that's not our space. That we can't help you with that." And they were like, "Well, but why not? It's like
Here's my
similar.
money,
It's
Andy. Take it.
and we're here. We want to pay you thousands of dollars. Just design our website, just please." And we turned it away. We would refer them elsewhere, because one other piece of the puzzle was that in us having this productized service, we had a very specific streamlined process with stages of the way where like, okay, so it's a law firm website. Here's our checklists of what we need at this stage, and everything is fixed scope. So we know exactly what we need. Like we need bio information. How many lawyers do they have? What's their bios? What are their practice areas? And so on. And it was very easy for us over time to make that like assembly line process and make sure that we would know what we need at every stage of the way. But if someone with a very different type of business were to come in, it wouldn't fit into our processes. But also we'd be starting from scratch in a lot of ways, because after designing dozens or hundreds of law firm websites, we had a lot of assets that we could use over and over again, layouts for like homepage or bio pages and things like that. And like if we were to take on like a restaurant website, we don't know exactly like what are the best plugins that we need for like having a menu or something, or galleries and things. And it was like having to figure all that out. There would be a lot of extra time that we would need to be spending on the first project that we wouldn't be able to leverage that knowledge in the future. But like after like doing our first website, we spent a lot more time than we spent on the 100th website. And that institutional knowledge, that knowledge base that we get from doing more and more sites that are similar and similar scope and things like that, we can use that in the future. But for like something that's completely different, we would have to charge significantly more, and it would felt like it would just be a distraction.
So did you ever have a time where you took someone on and you learned that the hard way? Because like that was very clear on how specific you were about why you didn't want it, but how did you learn that?
I'm trying to think if there was like a specific example. Like now I'm talking about it now, and like, yeah, that sounds all well and good, but did we make any particular like mistake? I'd say that there were a few projects that we took that were like, I guess like the first time that we take a project on that's like a very big in scope, that was more than we were used to. Like probably like the first time we handled a website where they had like the site in like many different languages, or a site with like thousands of team members, where we were previously working with like firms with a few to a few dozen people. There were a lot of things that we like learned that first time that we were like, okay, you know what, like this, we spent a lot more time and it cost us a lot more to do this project. But on the bright side, we've learned this now, and now we can adequately price for this in the future, and we can build for this. But let's take this opportunity to be mindful that if we were to take on a project like this in a different space, we couldn't leverage that knowledge in the future. I think that was probably the thing that like really resonated the most.
I just think the reason behind the question too, and that's a good example, is like whether it was at my old business in managed IT, or even honestly with our Kona and the fractional CFO services, and like I learned the hard way apparently, because like taking a client on, you're like, whoa, that's outside of our scope, and then you're dealing with headaches and missed expectations or whatever it might be. So it's hard, and usually those good lessons come from a lot of pain. And the other thing that you would mention that I'm very curious on, when you talked about productization or like the standardization. So give us the definitions in your minds and your mind about your philosophy of productization of a service versus normal services, and what differentiates the two, and how did you guys go about doing that?
Now I kind of feel like any service should be really productized. So like for for a service like web design, or for consulting, or for legal services, depending on what it is, typically like you might have like a billable rate. Like, all right, we're consulting for you. It'll be $200 an hour. And here's what like the big goal is that we're looking to achieve. And we may be able to give you some estimates of range of what the pricing will be, but we'll see when we get there, because things can creep up. Just like with a legal engagement, like here's my retainer, here's my billable hour, and things can come up. And so while this may seem straightforward at first, if things can go off the rails, and if the other side fights us on this, then it's going to cost a lot more, but we can't predict for that. So the idea of a productized service is for creating very fixed scope projects, so that nothing is a surprise, that you can adequately price for it, knowing generally the range of time it's going to take you, and making these processes very repeatable so that whether you have like what they're your first client or your 10th or 100th client, they all go through the same process. So like for like web design, for example, we'd say like, all right, you're going to get a website that has like, it's a brand new site. It'll have 10 pages, a home page, bio page, practice area pages, contact page, and all of that. And we'll provide content for it with this many words, and you'll provide us with headshots and things like that. And then here's what our process is, so that we could price for it, and we can have like a fixed price and say, the price for the site is going to be this. You're not going to pay more. You're not going to pay less. And we internally know, like, here's what our margin is going to be on average, give or take a few hours that it's going to give or take a few hours. It may be quicker, maybe longer, but we create a price that factors that in. And then the whole thing has a fixed scope. And so if someone wants something else that's beyond the scope of what we agreed on, well, that's an add-on, that's additional pricing or something like that. But it's not going to go off the rails, and it's not going to have this project drag on forever. And so everything kind of has like milestones. And the great thing about this is you can build a team on your side that can deliver for this repeatedly. And so you can say like, all right, so the client signs on. Well, here's our intake stage, and here's what we need from them at this stage. And then here is this next stage where we do the mock-up. Here's our checklist. Here's what we need to do. And because it's all fixed scope, fixed, like with these products, you can easily deliver on them. There's not so much like wiggle room and uncertainty that like you as like an owner or founder need to be involved in every step of the way. By having these fixed projects, you can really delegate to the team and make it so they can run things without you. That's also a very important thing there too.
Well, and what I heard a couple things is that productization in your mind, let me know if I'm on track or off track on this, is that it's standardization of the process. So it's not like you have to build a SaaS tool for your agency. This is like, you guys went about and said, I know exactly the price. And so it's a product because you understand what you're doing so well. And what's also fascinating about that, Andy, is that it's probably, I don't know, did you experience like this like flywheel where like the more that you succeeded on the back end like that, the easier it was to sell and say no to other shit that you know is going to mess up the system? Like, did you have some sort of like point where you're like, this is working the right way?
Yeah. And it to be clear, like we didn't get it right on day one. Like, like I don't want to I don't want to come off like some sort of genius who's got it all figured out. It was a very iterative process. The tools and like the project management tools we were using on day one compared to where we were years down the line were different. Our processes were different. What we had in our contracts and things like that were different. But it was a learning process for us. And we were able to further refine things, and it got better over time. Like we recognized that like, okay, like we didn't like, maybe a good example, with our pricing, like we would have milestone pricing. So you sign up today, you're going to put down a deposit of like 50%, and that will get this kicked off. And then when the site launches, whenever that might be, that'll be when you pay the next, the other remaining 50% of the setup fee. And then at that point, the ongoing MRR charges will be there. The problem that we had was we then had a few dozen clients where, oh yeah, like, hey, I know that we owe you our headshots and our bios, but we're, busy with this. We'll get that to you soon. Don't worry about it. And like, we had some clients that we were waiting on for years, and like, we couldn't charge them the MRR. Like, we were still waiting, like wouldn't get the second payment, but like every week we would have this repeatable process of reach out to them to follow up, like, hey, we're still waiting on you for this. Can we, like, if you want, we can send a photographer. There'll be an extra charge. We'll send a photographer to your firm to take a picture of you that we could put on the website. And so like we were like,
I'll hold your hand the whole way so we can get our money.
So, but then over time, our contract iterated to be, we'll charge you this % on day one, this % on the first deliverable of the site design, the first mock-up, and then the last milestone payment on either it was like 2 or 3 months, or when the site launches, whichever comes first. And then we're charging you the recurring charges by then.
Hmm.
And that we found really incentivized people who didn't have everything that they needed by that like 3 month or 2 month mark to get us those assets, because we're getting recurring charged. And so that made sure that like we also could make our revenue more predictable, that all right, if we sign this, here's what the cash flow situation looks like. And also like it got our projects through the pipeline much faster.
Super
For our
fascinating.
clients in particular who are lawyers, they're billing $500 an hour, and they didn't have time to schedule a photographer or to write down their biography for their bio page. But getting that next charge like created some urgency, and that really moved things along a lot faster. So yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
our productization, it was an iterative process. It wasn't on day one what it ended up being years later, but we were like working to improve that as we saw things that were like holdups or whatnot. But yeah,
Well, and
constantly
what's
working
so
for it.
so fascinating too is I caught something in there which I think is so important, is that you were able to forecast out the cash flow based on the projects. That's because they're predictable. How did that then impact your scaling on the sales and marketing to because obviously, I mean, in 3 years, man, like you did a lot of work, and I mean, you talk about hundreds of firms and websites you're talking about. Like, so how did that launch you and allow it? Like, what was your sales and marketing strategies to scale like you did?
So it was to be honest, it was a lot of trial and error. It was like, this was like my first real go of a business, and I had no idea what I was doing, I felt like. And so like I was trying every marketing tactic and channel I could. Some things worked well, others didn't. I tried a little bit of cold emailing, and that didn't work. And but like now I'm doing a lot of cold emailing, and it's hitting a lot better. I know what I'm doing now years later. But like that didn't work out so well. I did like paid ads, and it worked okay. But like for us, like the marketing channels that worked best were our SEO and content marketing, and partnerships in particular. And
Mm.
so like I spent a lot of time on our content marketing, and like honestly, I felt like in hindsight now, I was like, you had no idea what you were doing, but you really lucked out in that you like really understood like we understood the target market. I knew who I wanted to connect with, and so I was creating content geared towards them at a time when I thought they would be looking for a website. And so like I wouldn't just write like blog articles about how to hire a law firm web designer or something like that, because like if I did write articles like that, like that's very like in the sales funnel, bottom of funnel. That's like
Mhm.
when someone's ready to hire. But
Mhm.
those like terms were very competitive, and we had a relatively young site. And so I wasn't going to outcompete a marketing agency that was around for 10 years before we even started. So I went the angle of like really, I interviewed a lot of our clients, and just like as I was just like talking with them through the sales process and things like that, I wanted to understand where they were when they were coming to us, and where they were in their cycle of their practice. And so a lot of them were like just starting up their practice, and they were not just looking for websites, but they were looking for like IT solutions and other software. And so I wrote a lot of content about software for law firms, like practice management software for law firms and things like that. And we ranked very well for it. I created like downloadable like lead magnets and guides and things like that. So I would get people's email addresses, and then once they would like download these guides, I would have an email sequence of content that would start out geared towards the type of content they were downloading. So like practice management software for law firms. And then slowly over time, that content would change to, well, if as you're gearing up your practice and looking at new management software,
Mhm.
how about building your firm's web presence and being able to attract new clients and impress the clients that are getting referred to you, and built like really building out that kind of content funnel. That was a big source of our traffic. And it just worked out very well, that like I was really in tune with what our clients were interested in and where they were, and being able to like
Speak to them.
go like hit them in a different angle than the marketing agencies were.
Well, and what I'm taking in away from this too, Andy, and I want to get
Mm.
into some of the content marketing strategies too, because that's also heavily what you're involved in today, is like, man, like the amount of professional service organizations that I've worked with is in like, and again, like totally guilty of this, of like, need revenue, say yes, and then like you're reinventing the wheel, like you said, every single time. And it's so hard to get out of that hamster wheel, but not only from the operations and the cash flow and the expectations on the back end, like you said, that you already covered. If you don't have like a standardization of your clients, you can't talk to everybody about everything all the time, everywhere. It's like,
R-
right? I mean, like
Right. Well,
you were so specific that you understood. You actually understood and talked to them like a reasonable human being. I mean, like I don't know if that's too simple, but
No, well, that was like part of what part of our marketing was. We were in this niche. We were law firm marketing, so just doing web design for law firms. And I know that there are like some marketing agencies that even pared that down further. So they were like marketing for personal injury firms
Mm,
only, and that, like that's our bread and butter. That's specifically what we can speak to, and they would create content geared towards that, and their messaging would be all geared towards that because we're not just competing with other law firm marketing companies. We're competing with the mom and pops, the local web design and marketing agencies in your city, and like the people that you're meeting at BNIs and like
yeah,
networking meetings and things. And
yeah.
so you're getting like a card from someone who's like, oh yeah, I do web design and marketing, and I know the Minneapolis landscape very well, and I can help you rank for your business. But our pitch was, well, whatever another marketing agency is telling you, if it's their first time marketing a law firm, you can't market a law firm like you market a restaurant in Minneapolis, regardless. But you can market a law firm in Minneapolis, similar a personal injury law firm in Minneapolis, simpler to how you'd market a personal injury
Hmm.
firm in Houston, Texas.
Hmm.
There's going to be some geographic differences, but the way that we market these types of practices is going to be generally the same. And having that expertise, like, and this was like a nice thing that I could pitch as well. Like, I am a lawyer, I have a legal background, and I can also help to make sure that you're not running afoul of ethics issues, which was like a big thing that a lot of lawyers were
Not a
concerned
lot
about as
of
well.
web designers are dropping that phrase. That's awesome. So Andy, like on this topic, and I'm using some of the my current situations at Arcona with and the intentional growth podcast and training that, content marketing is one of our things, but like, even if we know like the people that are listening in, I think they're one of the most amazing things that I've kind of come to the realization. B2B and B2C, you need like that's the first lens. Like the B2C, your marketing is so
Mhm.
different. It's client acquisition. You just pile things into ads and people are clicking on social media to buy. B2C is like, and especially services, it's you need to prove that you are actually worth a shit and you know what you're doing and that they're gonna engage with you and it's gonna be legit, which is very set up to do content marketing like you're talking about. The question that I think a lot of people have is how do you determine what's working, what's not working, and what to say, and then where to actually partner up with these people online. And so maybe can you kind of give an overview of the strategy and how you did this? Because I think a lot of people can learn a lot from what you did and then also what you're doing right now.
So there's a lot here, but I guess in terms of like things like partnership channels that we did, we made a lot of partnerships, like referral partnerships or like advertising partnerships, where we pay like a spiff to another complementary company in our industry, or like a referral fee, or like if you're a SaaS business, like an affiliate, like just like finding affiliates and things like that. And we spent a lot of time like cultivating those, and I'll say that like 90% of them sent us nothing, and but
Yep.
like 10% of them sent us a ton of business. Like yeah, we partnered with some like legal oriented publications that sent us a lot of good like
Hmm.
qualified leads each month and things like that. And like that was a particularly great channel. And so like we
Can you
were
explain? No, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah
can you explain like what you mean by partner? Like, so what did that
yeah
actually look like, and what were you doing for them that incentivized them to give you guys the leads?
Sure. So like different, I guess different situations would call for different things and we'd have different arrangements. But basically we would find like we'd like research the landscape. We see like, all right, so what are our customers and potential customers reading? What are they using? What are they interested in? And other vendors, basically, I would reach out to them and say, hey, we probably have some overlap with our customers. Here's what we can do for you. Like, I'm happy to do a really in-depth write-up of your product and refer people to your product and get people to sign up for your product. Like, we got a good amount of traffic, and so I'm happy to prioritize you. In exchange, like, could you, if you have customers and if you're interviewing them and onboarding them and see that they have like a bad website, refer them or introduce them to us, and like we could pay you a referral fee for either leads or for new signed customers, and maybe there can be like some ongoing arrangement or something like that. It similar to like how I would like pitch affiliates today. And so like today, like with a SaaS business, I do a lot of outreach to other blogs and websites that are affiliates of, or that I see that are either in our space or that I see that they are active affiliates of other products in this space. And so I reach out to them and pitch them like, hey, I'm happy to promote your product. We also have like an affiliate program if that's interesting to you. And if you send clients our way, then you make money. It's a win-win.
Well, and I think what's interesting too for the listeners that have more like a traditional sales and marketing approach, like you mentioned BNI, right? It's a lot of the networking. Where like in the online space, you're writing and developing good content for these. So it's like almost like networking online with content.
Oh,
but you're kind of hitching each other's.
For me, I found that worked a lot better. I was part of a BNI chapter for like 1 to 2 years, something like that. And it yielded me, I think, nothing in terms of like actually closed business. I know like some BNI chapters are like very profitable and doing well for everybody. But like for me, like my target customers weren't just in the New York area. They were everywhere online. And like a referral from a mortgage broker who knows a lawyer isn't like going to be a great referral just because they know a lawyer. And I got plenty of leads from people who are like, hey, because like the BNI mantra is like just to keep referring people and keep generating leads. But I would often get like lawyers referred to me who weren't really invested in getting a new website, but for like partner vendors who are online and have their own online businesses, SaaS businesses, other service businesses, they could refer people to us, and like they're doing a lot of volume with my target audience. And so it's much more likely that they could find people that are a good fit for us, that are ready or in the process of like discovery process to find a service like ours. And getting that referral, getting that recommendation makes it much more likely it's going to close and be like a successful deal because it comes from a referral.
And like, the conversation is taking place when the conversation is supposed to be happening, right? Not because you're in a physical space and you wanted to refer someone. They're online looking for something, and it actually makes sense why it's referred together. And I don't know, like, so as we're progressing down the only the 3-year journey, which is ridiculously short, this is a more scalable and repeatable sales process as well versus going to a bunch of BNI. So how did this, was it hockey stick growth on the revenue side, or like what did this do to your guys' revenue in the firm?
Yeah, so it was like I said, like it was a lot of trial and error. There, like, years later, I'm more confident in like channels and things like that. I would have like spent less time on like paid search and more time on like certain types of partnerships, because like at first I was just trying to build partnerships with everyone I could. But yeah, knowing now like that 90% of them weren't a good fit, I know a bit better about what is a good fit and like what is a more interesting incentive to these partners and things like that. Because also like a very common thing was that with new partners, everyone would be excited at first. Like, all right, great, I'm so excited to be working together. Let's do a webinar together and we'll introduce each other to our audiences. And then nothing after that. Like there might be like a little bit
there, man.
but like the most fruitful partnerships were ones where like there was this continued incentive, and where the partner has a funnel, has a system that can easily feed into the referred business.
Mm-hmm.
And so like for like a SaaS business, something like an affiliate, like having an affiliate program, an affiliate link or something like that can be helpful. Like for now, like for example, for now, I reach out to a lot of websites that are affiliate sites that are where I know that they are making their money from referring people to products and making recurring revenue from that. So knowing that that is their business model, I want to have an attractive offer for them. I want to incentivize them to send people my way. And so what can help with that? One, having an easy to sign up for affiliate program. Two, having assets that they could use because they're going to want to like create an article or some piece of content or series of content that relate to my product so that they can send people my way.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, really making sure that I can make it as easy as possible for the people who are going to be able to send customers my way is very important.
So where in this 3 plus little over 3 year journey did all of a sudden someone knock on the door? Like what happened and how did the whole acquisition and the buyer surface?
Yeah, so the buyer came from a partner that we had. So we had been partnering with other other vendors, other firms, and other software companies and things like that. And one partner of ours was an outsourced IT company focusing on legal. And we were planning like just I was it was like before a conference, like a few weeks before a conference, making plans to meet up with people and all of that. And they were like, "Oh yeah, well, we hope to see you at New York for this legal conference. By the way, we have a lot of mutual customers. We're both clearly going after the same market. We provide complementary kind of services. Are you potentially interested in being acquired? We're interested in getting in that marketing space and having that offer for our customers. What do you think?" And I was kind of like, probably not, but let's talk. If like I was not ready for that. And I like in hindsight, I feel like in hindsight, I think I had a lot of the pieces in place, but it wasn't something I was intentionally planning towards from the beginning. But we did things I think right from the beginning, like at least
We covered a lot of what you
we did
did
things
right
right
so
over
far, man.
time
Yeah.
that made it attractive and made it work out. And so like they're interested in our model, and we're like, all right, well, we have recurring revenue and we have this book of MRR, and this is what our like projections are based on our history and based on our channels and our model. This is where we think we're gonna be. And so like, all right, they're like, all right, well, that's great. Like that, like, so like this business is an asset now. There's something of value here, but not just the MRR. We also have this brand that we've created, like us doing, like focusing on the legal vertical and marketing for the legal vertical, but also us building out this content marketing machine. We've got this blog that has a ton of traffic. We've been doing webinars. We've been creating guides and pieces of content that are getting a lot of traffic, so that we are pretty well known in the space. That was another thing, an intangible that was something that the acquiring company thought was really valuable. And so
Did you know what was your level of understanding of valuations and like what your company could be worth? And did you have any idea of what that meant to you
nothing.
personally?
I had no idea. Like it wasn't really on my radar at all. Like I was just like my goal was like I want to increase our revenue so I can increase the amount that I take home.
Yeah, very very straightforward information, right? Like here's the goal: take more revenue equals more cash flow.
Right. Like I wish I could say like I here are like these things I'm trying to optimize for, but I knew what our margins were. I knew what our growth trajectory was, and I like my goal was to as best I could increase the amount of customers that we were taking in from month to month. And so yeah, in terms of like valuation, I had no idea what a appropriate valuation would be, but at the same time I was like, we're a 3-year-old company, we're still like in early growth mode. I'm just not thinking about valuations because I'm not I'm this is not something that I think was like ready to sell at that point.
So then, what process or
Mm.
what information or resources did you lean into to figure out what this was going to mean to you and what your options were?
So, like in terms of like making the decision to sell, like my co-founder and I were like, all right, so like here are our like I hate financial projections because they always seem to be crazy wrong. um like I've started a lot of projects over the years, and if there's like one thing that is consistent, it's that like revenue and projections just are wildly off. There are like plenty of things that you don't think about and account for. And so like, but anyway, I digress. But like we at the time, like we're like, all right, so like here are our conservative projections. Here are our projections for the next few years. Like here's where we see this going. Any offer that we're going to entertain has to be like
More than
significantly
so.
more than this, because we have this asset, and here's, if we put in this effort moving forward, here's where it's going to be. And so yeah, where do we like, do we want to keep working at this towards this trajectory, or do we sell it and then move on to another business? What do we want to do? And so like that, those were conversations that me and my like co-founder were having at the time.
Did you, were there any difficult parts of those conversations, or were any times where you guys didn't really understand which direction to go?
Well, like it's a to sell a business is a tough call. Like I was trying to look at it like as objectively as possible. The but like of course like on all of the content and all of the branding, like my name was very heavily associated with it. I was the one doing presentations. I was the one speaking at like CLE, like continuing legal education conferences and things like that. And so like for the past few years, like this had been very wrapped up with, it feels like wrapped up with my identity, right? And
Mm-hmm.
moving on to something else, possibly in a new space, which like is new and exciting. Mentally, I like really tried to be objective, to be like, okay, like here's where we're at, here's our trajectory, here are our numbers. If you have this asset and this is where it is, what would you tell someone else to do? So like I found like that was probably like taking it from like that angle was particularly interesting, because I think about when people are like doing like salary negotiations and things like that, things can get personal, and like you have emotional attachments. And so like, you know, you've got that friend who like won't ask for a raise, or like isn't fighting for a raise, or isn't quitting a job to change to where they can get like significantly more because of just emotional factors. And like you're on the sidelines like coaching them like, no, here's what you should
So
do.
easy, man. Yeah, just
Right.
take the stick out of your
Like
eye.
easier said than done when you're so close to it. Like there are those emotional attachments, and you'll, you know, make justifications in your head. And but if it were someone else, you would be telling them like, oh, this is so obvious, like here is the clear objective choice to make. And so I try to take it from the perspective like, step back, take like a look at the big picture. What would you tell someone else if this were them, what to
Mm-hmm.
do?
Did you guys hire a broker, investment banker, and try to get, like, once you guys decided that it was time to sell, like, what was the process you guys went through?
So the so like when like so the other side had a broker person, consultant, advisor, something. And that was like, that person was like leading the discussion on their end. On from our end, when it was getting to be more real, I did bring on a lawyer. Like
You knew a couple probably.
yeah, I knew a couple. I got a recommendation, and that worked out. But like, I was like, my partner is like, "Do you want to handle this?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not. I'm not an M&A lawyer. I've never done a deal like this before. Like, I like on like paper, I'm sure like I could read a deal and be like, all right, well, here is something, but I'm not gonna know what I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what's commonly seen in these agreements and things like that. I don't know everything that can go wrong if we sign this, and I personally don't want you to blame me if I miss something. So let's hire a lawyer, let's pay them some money, and we'll have peace of mind that this was done right. But on our end, we thankfully had some advisors that we could turn to and mentors, And so we reached out to them and we just got like their opinions, and they gave us some feedback and gave us some coaching, and that was particularly helpful to us. But I'd say like, yeah, if you're going through an acquisition for the first time, whether it's the buyer or seller, I would, well, one, if this is potentially like a life-changing amount of money, if it's like going to be a big change for you, obviously if this business is big, if it's, you know, you want to make sure that you're doing it right, make sure that you're not, you know, getting messed with, and that you have the right people around you. So like have advisors, have have a good lawyer that
People
you're
that
paying
have done
for.
done it before, right?
Like people who have done this before, absolutely.
Did you any of the people you were talking to, did you get other buyers involved, or like what was your philosophy on that?
So the kind of like the second like this potential buyer came to us and was like, hey, we're interested in acquiring you. I was like, all right, well, if if this is like situation is presenting itself, like I would certainly think, let's find out what our market rate is, and let's see what other people would be interested in paying, like if we present it to them. And so I reached out to my network, I reached out to some other vendors, and I was like, hey, there's a company that might be acquiring us, and like big strokes and all of this, like big picture and everything. Is this would you be interested in acquiring us? And like if so, what things are you looking for, and what ranges are we talking about? Before like we like go further in, I don't want to like waste your time, but just let's talk in like theoreticals and stuff like that. And so there were a few people that we were talking to about this at the same time, and which was like good for us to help us really understand like at this stage where like what our value would be, and what what structures other companies would be thinking about. And so that gave us some good insights as well.
And I'd love to pull that thread. That's
Yeah.
perfect. Is it the differences like that these buyers were? How did they? What were the different, or if they were different, approaches to the valuation?
Hmm.
And then the second part of that is the structure, like you mentioned, because
Yeah.
you could have, those are two huge levers that have,
Yeah.
or huge spectrums that have a lot of different potential in them.
Sure. So like on one end of the spectrum, like one company reached out to us that actually had like perfect timing. A company reached out to us saying that they're interested in acquiring us. They were in not the same industry, but they were doing marketing for another space. It was like medical or something like
Okay.
that. And they were interested in our brand equity, and they basically wanted our brand so that they could take their processes and bring that into the legal space.
Hmm.
And they were interested in our brand, and they were interested in our MRR, our processes and workflows. They would probably scrap in favor of theirs, which was working for them, and they were a much bigger company.
Hmm.
And so like for them, like valuation was like they were thinking of valuation based on like the intangibles of like our traffic and what they could sense of our brand equity in our space, which you know is a little ill-defined, but it gives you some wiggle room, right?
Hmm.
And then there's like the MRR and the recurring revenue that you have. But for but for like a company that is really trying to that is in the same vertical, that's maybe doesn't offer the services that you have currently,
Hmm.
that's like looking to get into that, evaluation might not be just based on the book of business or the intangibles, but also might be related to the processes that you've built internally and stuff like that, that they could leverage, and that knowledge base and everything like that. And so like that we were seeing very different ways that like companies were like assigning value to the business, and
Based on
really
like
based
what they wanted to do with your business, right? And how did that,
exactly.
Andy? Was it like in based on how you would productize your services? Was it a valuation based on a multiple of revenue or a multiple of EBITDA, or like how did these buyers place? What was the method they actually
Mhm.
went through to actually value the business?
So I'd say that some people, their valuation was very based on like ARR and like based on like revenue metrics and things like that. And others, like other people that we were getting into discussions with, were like yeah, like they were interested in recurring revenue, but like they were also interested in I guess in the brand and like leveraging our brand and that kind of equity. And so they're like, given like that we were a company for like 3 years at this time that we're like getting interest, like our revenue numbers were, I would say, nothing spectacular that absent an amazing revenue or EBITDA multiple would it have been interesting to us. Because like I said, like we're a young company, we are in growth mode.
Mm-hmm.
Our like our
You're eating up
EBITDA, I would
cash.
say, was like we're paying ourselves, we're paying our contractors, and like we're investing in a lot of different marketing channels that some of which like feel like we were still figuring out, but we had some direction on. But like if I were to shut off the valve of spend on paid ads that I was trying to see if they would work, or things like that, and like be like a more like operate like a more mature business where we had things figured out and we're leaner, we would have much higher like EBITDA, but like that wouldn't have been the case for us at the time. And so like like we were saying to these different companies, if you try and make us an offer based on EBITDA or recurring revenue,
It
we're
doesn't make any
probably
sense.
not going to be interested. And like upfront, like here's why: we're a
Mm-hmm.
relatively
Mm-hmm.
small company, relatively young, and we're in growth mode now. And here's what our current trajectory looks like, and you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
And like we'll sign NDAs and go through all of that, and you can see what that is. And like this is what the path is that we're on. And so here's where like we've built up our brand in the space, and you can see that. And so we're gonna have to negotiate around a little bit of like we're gonna have to find some like different metrics or
Blue
different
sky,
different
right?
different
The nice lingo of the blue sky and the brand equity. And how, Andy, like, because I actually had this gentleman on, his name is Lowell, and he was an investment banker for SaaS companies, and he actually was a corporate buyer, so they would go out and strategically acquire companies. He's like, it all had to do with like what we could do with the business, right? So
right.
like it wasn't necessarily multiple V, but because like we buy this business, this is what it could do to our company,
Yeah,
which I'm
absolutely.
assuming was a lot of how those buyers were approaching it. How did what the buyer wanted to do with your business, did the buyers and what they wanted to do with it impact the deal structure that they offered you guys? Like, did you have a spread of deal structures or different types?
So I guess yeah, I guess to speak to that, like what I can speak
Mm-hmm.
to, when we were talking with like different buyers, like this is exactly the situation that we were finding ourselves in, which was like a company that might be in our space, in our market, doing like marketing for our audience. They just wanted our book of business and our brand to fold into their processes and things like that. And so like their idea of our valuation would be particularly lower than a company that is not yet in our space but looking to get into the space and cross sell
Mm-hmm.
our product to their existing large base of customers. There's a lot more value that they could extract from this business than what someone else could. And same kind of situation for a company that is not in our market yet and has no brand in our market, but is looking to get into our market. And so like
Mm-hmm.
that was absolutely the case. Like exactly what you're saying, different businesses with different like approaches to like what they could do with our business dramatically affected what they saw as the valuation.
Did that also impact, like you said, one of them was going to scrap your processes, one of them was going to keep them? That's very similar, Andy. Like when we sold our business, one wanted to keep everything as is because they wanted to get into our geographic area. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, there wasn't as many synergies, and the value was way lower than the one that we sold to, which was tons of overlap, tons of synergies, and a lot of so it's a higher purchase price. But on your situation, but based on like keeping the SOPs and the people versus not, did that impact like a percentage of the purchase price that went to earn out or went to cash up front? Like, like, and again, you don't have to give the percentage or anything, but that did it impact like what they wanted to do with you and how you guys were going to hold the risk or not hold the risk after the deal?
Yeah, so I guess I can. This information is public, so like I stayed on for a few years after the fact, and like part of what they were interested in aside from the business was our processes and was our brand. And I was like very personally tied to the brand because I was the marketing and maybe like in being mindful of this for the future of trying to like really build that business that you can remove yourself from. If you are the face of the business and if you are the brand, that's gonna like tie you to the business, right? And so like yeah, by me being a lot of the brand, like that was something that the company was interested in. And so maybe
Yeah,
I'm losing my thread a little bit,
no,
but
that's okay. Because like you don't have to disclose all the different deal structures. I just think, and specifically like in agencies, Andy, where like I mean, I've had plenty of agencies on the show that I've either sold or like people that have acquired agencies, and it's a lot of 3-year earnout because it's people doing
mm,
the deliverables. And I'm just curious, like, did you now when you look back,
mm.
the way that you built the agency and the productization and standardization, was that a net benefit as far as like how much money up front versus over time compared to the other agencies that might be acquired these days?
Yeah, so I guess I will say that I like no matter what, like whatever really whatever type of business you are building, I would strongly recommend having recurring revenue, having SOPs, having like documentation for all of your processes. Like in a perfect world, the business would be able to run without you. And if it can run without you, then it is this asset that can be sold without you staying on for a period of time to fill that management role and or transition or hand things off. And I guess I would say that like that is probably like the first most important thing. And
Because then it impact then you can remove yourself before you sell it. I mean, which is exactly like what you're saying.
right.
Because
And I
you
know
either
that
do it
like
while you own your company or while someone else owns the company, right?
right. But I guess also like to that point, like there I know a lot of people like when they're ready to sell, they're like, I'm ready to sell. I want to be out of this. Either I want to retire or I want to like I'll stay on for a little bit of a transitory period and then I'm moving on to this next startup idea that I'm more excited about. And so like if you want like if that's your mindset, if that's where you want to be, you have to really be able to remove yourself to make it viable to that acquiring company that it can more easily run without you in a short period of time. So like I will say like while I felt like we definitely had those pieces in place and I could hand off a lot of the business. Yeah, part of what our acquiring company wanted was like they really appreciated like our brand equity and like what I had put into it. And so yeah, part of what intrigued them was my marketing acumen. And so I stayed on for a while and I lent that to our brand as well as their larger brand as well.
So, I know we're running short on time here. Is the any when you look back now, because I want to be able to
Mm,
give you a couple minutes to talk about what you're doing right now too, and how you're
mm,
viewing what you're doing now differently after your experience. But like when
mm.
you look back at the business that you had sold, Andy, is with your identity, you had mentioned identity, and like especially you doing so much. Do you feel like is there anything that you would have done differently, or like you happy with how things went down, or like kind of what overall like how do you judge the whole experience?
Yeah, I think I mean I'm thankful. I think the experience went very well. I'm happy with how it all turned out. Like I like there are I don't say that there are any particular lessons that like big mistakes we made in our process. Really, I feel like there are a lot of things that I kind of like from building the business. There are things I learned, but like there are things that I don't think I would have learned if someone would have like told them to me. Like
Yeah, I hear you.
I didn't know that like for us paid search marketing wouldn't be a spectacular channel. That's something that like it took experimentation to figure out. Like things like that are just like the things that like I'm kind of thinking about like oh if I would have known now. But yeah, the only situation where I feel like I say to myself like oh I wish I would have known this years ago is yeah I wish I would have known that Bitcoin would be like 50 grand or whatever because in 2013
Oh, no. I
this
know.
guy wrote an article about a law firm that was starting to accept Bitcoin. And on the record, this guy wrote, I think that, while it's interesting that this firm is accepting Bitcoin at $92 per Bitcoin, I think it's overvalued. So I hope I
I think
didn't.
it's 39 grand right now, but it was 60. So it depends on what day you're looking at to feel that
I
kind of pain.
and I'm sure it'll depend also what day whoever is listening to this podcast episode.
Right.
Like if this episode goes live in 2 weeks, it might be back to 50. Who knows? But like, but to my defense here, and if you suddenly feel like I've lost all credibility with you as a listener, like oh this guy here. To be fair, in like 2013, the only people who were using Bitcoin were buying drugs online. Um,
Oh, that's awesome. That is a I like that lessons learned. I should have bought Bitcoin and or anything in the stock market in 2020.
yeah,
The
right. But
um So we can,
Yeah.
for as far as now, Andy, just no, I appreciate it. I want to be respectful of your time. As
Yeah.
far as now, what you're doing with your business, like,
Mhm.
are you doing some? Are you thinking about the business a little bit differently, or how? Like, what behaviors or intentions do you have now that are different now that you're on round two?
Yeah. So yeah, now I run a SaaS business. Yeah, a bit different from an agency, but taking a lot of the lessons that we learned in building a productized service business to us. Like there are new things that we're thinking about, like customer onboarding and like in-app metrics and user experience and things like that. But even so, there are things that like we taking from that from that building that business, whether it's like content marketing and how to better like understand our audience and understand what the pains that they're going through when they're looking for a product like yours, things like that. Like that is like I found to be like super helpful in building this business, and like having this marketing background also like extremely helpful. I know what channels have, like worked for a service business, and while it may be different for a SaaS business, still being in like the B2B space, um, I have a better sense of like what channels would and would not work for us, and importantly, like what's scalable and yeah, like for a SaaS business in particular, in the early stages, we do things that don't scale so that we can get to a point where we can do things that scale.
Are you looking at the business as an asset, and are you more like acutely aware of like, hey, this thing someone might want it at some point, and do you have a little bit more understanding of what you want with it, or like where's your head at as far as those topics?
Yeah, 100%. So like even when this startup was just me and my co-founder, I was building out SOPs for how I was going to do different things, from our marketing automation to our content pipeline to like help tickets and things like that, and just regular operations, like those traction sort of things, the
Mm-hmm.
like the KPIs, the metrics. That was like I think one thing that I really learned from the company that acquired us was like they're using an operating system that we had pieces of that kind of before we were acquired, but I didn't really fully appreciate the scope of something like traction or Rockefeller habits
Mm-hmm.
scaling up, anything like that beforehand, and now really leaning into that very numbers focused. So I can know on any given day or week where there are challenges that we can work to address.
That's awesome. Andy, this has been an absolute blast, man. Last two questions.
Yeah.
On the first one, love to understand what people think the word intentional means because it's the name of the show. So, what does the word intentional mean for you?
So intentional. So doing something in a particularly deliberate and thoughtful way towards achieving a particular end result.
Boom. You nailed it, man. I love that. That was very for on the fly and not having it at the tip of your tongue. That was pretty good. Where can people find you? And then we'll put all the links in the show notes.
Sure. So I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. There are not any other Andy Cabassos out there, I don't think. Twitter at Andy Cabasso, LinkedIn Andrew Cabasso. My startup today is called Postaga. That's Postaga, and that started about because of my experience in running an agency and doing marketing. Was I wish that there were a piece of software that could help me streamline my cold outreach processes, my doing cold outreach for building links so we can better improve our search traffic, to also doing better cold outreach for finding partnerships, affiliates, and also, for example, doing PR outreach so I could pitch podcasters like Ryan to have me on as a guest, and also doing cold outreach for sales. And so, from my experience with running an agency and trying to do a lot of this cold outreach and not finding a good system for it, we built our own all-in-one platform, and that's Postaga. And if anyone in the audience wants to check it out, if you use coupon code podcast50, that'll get you 3 months at 50% off.
That's awesome. And I was full disclosure, I was out on the website like, this is really interesting because that's all the strategies you're talking about, the things that we're looking at for Arcona. So very intrigued, and I'm pumped to dive in myself. Andy, this has been an absolute blast. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks, Ryan.